All right. Well, good evening, everybody. Did you enjoy Lou's Deli? That's the first question. Those of you eating here in the room, Lou's Deli, yeah, good stuff. All right. That was like so lame. Come on, like, yeah. Good, come on, so low. All right. So, well, my name is Craig Register, and I'm thrilled to welcome you to Detroiter Speak, the final session of our series, Making Labor Work, Organizing for Power in the 21st Century. And it's been a pretty awesome series, and there's some folks in the room who I know have watched online, and welcome to you who are watching online on YouTube, on Facebook. And I think some of you know this, but we always like to remind ourselves that the space we're in, of course, is a newer space. The folks that have put it together, and certainly the namesake, General Baker, is not new at all. And we love to lift up General Baker's memory and remind ourselves that there's so much that he taught just by his example, and that we want to continue to build on here in this space. And so we're grateful to be here at the General Baker Institute and to be back in person. And there's a great group of folks that put this series together every semester. And this is almost 2 years now we partnered with the GBI. And of course, most of that has been virtual, but thankfully we're now back in person, even if we still have questions about where the whole pandemic's headed. But, you know, we'll deal with that. We'll deal with that when it comes. And so I'm going to just say a few things to kind of get ourselves started. We have some awesome speakers tonight, and we have Elliot joining us. The huge Elliot is like 8 feet on the wall behind us, and we got Carolyn who's going to join the conversation as well. Carolyn does a lot in this space, of course, but even for the series itself, so runs the whole tech thing and also will be joining the conversation. And then, of course, you all will as well, because after we hear some remarks from our speakers, we're going to open it up and have a conversation. And so thank you again for being here. Tonight's session's theme is organizing where you are, where all of us are. So organizing where you are. And we know that this class has focused a lot on labor. It's focused a lot on unions and organizing workplaces. But we've also heard people talk about organizing in other spaces, schools, communities, neighborhoods, right? And so the conversation tonight is going to cut across all of that. And we hope, and this is a challenge to our speakers here, to Elliot, to Carolyn, we keep talking about this toolbox that we're carrying around with us. I've referenced it many times. I hope that you really leave here with either some tools you already had as organizers that you can sharpen to kind of kill the metaphor. Also, get that, to sharpen, kill, that was a pun. Anyways, or the new tools that maybe you didn't have, that you never thought to have, but that we're all thinking of ourselves as organizers, and that we'll take these tools wherever we go and wherever we organize. And so that's the spirit of tonight's final session. And I just wanted to reflect on a few things on the series for just a couple minutes before I introduce our speakers and we hear from them. There's been a sort of healthy tension that I've sensed over this series, tension in a good sense. It's emerged between organizing that's focused on communities and organizing that's focused on workplaces. And sometimes that was clearer, sometimes maybe it was more obscured. But of course, I think we know in real life, these distinctions and separations between these sort of locations are not so clean, right? And so all workplaces, of course, exist in spaces, in geographic spaces that we call communities, where people and families live and coexist. We're surrounded by workplaces in this neighborhood. Go up Livernois, you'll see workplaces. You go down Livernois, you'll see workplaces. So we're in a community surrounded by workplaces, right? And the flip side too, anywhere we live also includes workplaces. So think of your own neighborhood, wherever you live, wherever you call home. And there's workplaces that are surrounding you. Different kind perhaps, but there are workplaces. So as we frame the final session tonight, and really the whole series in many ways, we should be mindful that these distinctions between community, quote unquote, and workplace are much more intertwined, right, in real life. In addition, and we're not going to get deep into this, but there's histories behind these tensions. And to this day, there's still debates. And some of these debates have come about a little bit in our series. We've heard them a little bit among what we might broadly define as sort of leftists or progressives, radicals, socialists, communists, revolutionaries, some of the people that we've heard in this series. There's tensions as to where we should be placing or prioritizing our energies and our time as organizers. I think these are healthy tensions. Does the working class still matter? This question has come up, I think, before. Do unions still matter? Most people aren't in unions, so why are we talking about unions, right? Should we spend time focusing on organizing where we work or focus on organizing where we live? Where is there potential for more power? And our title for this series is Organizing for Power. So where are we building power? Are we building power primarily where we work or primarily where we live? Where do we feel more confident, more comfortable organizing? This is all of us. Perhaps there aren't clear or easy answers to these questions. I don't think there are. And maybe this is also a false choice, this idea that they're kind of counterposed, the workplace and the community. Why not choose both, right? And maybe where we choose to spend our energy and time organizing isn't a static thing either. Maybe it changes over time. You know, I can speak for myself just briefly. In the last 2 years, I became very involved in my own union at U of M. In the last 2 years, very involved. Previous to those 2 years, I was barely involved in my union. I was a member, but I wasn't actively involved in my workplace in the same way. 25 years ago, when I lived in Southwest Detroit, I was much more attuned to and thinking about the community organizing than I was the place that I worked. And so it changes over time. We should also keep that in mind. Wherever we choose to spend our time, and I'll just take another minute to do the framing, but wherever we choose to spend our time, I think organizing, as is the theme of this class, one thing should be clear by now, I would hope, is that we need more people to think of themselves as organizers in the broadest sense, and to understand also that there are tools, techniques, strategies that have demonstrated themselves to be useful and effective by other people, many of whom we've heard from in this series. And I think we also, last week, a good topic came up in the discussion around individualism. We live in a very individualistic society, right? We know that. I think we've heard this semester, we really need to push back against the deeply embedded culture of individualism in our society and realize that we truly need each other. Like, we all need each other wherever we are, whether we're referring to our neighbors where we live or the coworkers we encounter every day in our workplaces. We need to be thinking collectively because, as the old solidarity labor slogan goes, an injury to one really is an injury to all. And this is true both where we live and where we work. So with that sort of collaborative spirit in mind as sort of a framing for tonight, let's introduce our speakers who will talk from different places where they organize, workplaces and communities. And we have some great speakers, and we're going to hear some neat stories. I'm really, and neat is such a corny word. It's such a bad word, neat. Anyways, we're going to hear some really interesting stories, some compelling stories. And so let me introduce our speakers, and then we'll open up with a few short answer questions and then dig a little deeper. So first to my right is Zach Rue. What? Rio, my gosh, I practiced that and I messed it up. Okay. Zach Rio, who is, I'm sorry, Z, is a member of the Detroit Democratic Socialists of America Labor Working Group, Detroit DSA Labor Working Group, on staff at Labor Notes, which we've heard about, we're going to hear more about, and until recently a Transport Workers Union Local 320 or TWU Local 320 shop steward at the Mogo Bike Share in Detroit. So welcome to you, Zach. Thank you for being here. Snap for Zach. All right. Okay. And next to Zach is Danielle Albert. Did I say it right? Albert. Awesome. Okay. Who's in it? I'm sorry. Being a little loose here. Okay. Danielle is an associate professor of graphic design at Wayne State. She's the author of the Detroit Printing Co-op, The Politics of the Joy of Printing, which was published in 2019, which I had no idea. That's so awesome. I want to see that book. She is also the recipient of the 2021 Kresge Award. She was elected president of AAUP AFT Local 6075 last year, which represents 1,700 faculty and academic staff at Wayne State. Prior to being elected president, she was the union representative for the Department of Art and Art History and acted with the Coalition of Unions on campus. So welcome to you. Okay. And we're going to introduce Elliot. So Elliot Smith is up here on the Zoom and joining us from, remind us, Elliot, where you're joining us from?
From Washington, D.C.
D.C., I believe. D.C.?
That's right,
D.C. We
DC.
can't hear you right now. We're going to work on the tech, but from D.C., Washington, D.C.
Yep.
All right. And he is a national social justice organizer for Repairers of the Breach and the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival. He's the co-director of student and youth engagement for the campaign and coordinates outreach to labor unions across the nation. During the past 3 years, he has helped build the Poor People's Campaign as the movement aims to challenge the interlocking injustices of systemic racism, poverty, militarism, and the war economy, ecological devastation, and the nation's false moral narrative of religious nationalism. As an undergraduate student at Radford University, he helped organize an unprecedented voter registration drive on campus in the 2017 Virginia general elections. The results led to an historic progressive chamber in the lower house of the Virginia General Assembly. Elliot is the great-grandnephew of civil rights matriarch Amelia Boynton, who was the lead strategist in the Selma voting rights struggle and was tear gassed and beaten unconscious by sheriff deputies on the Edmund Pettus Bridge for the right to vote. Elliot is a native Washingtonian and currently lives in Washington, D.C. So Elliot, thank you so much for joining us. We look forward to hearing from you on Zoom. And finally, and then we'll do a nice round for everybody. Thanks for the snaps. And finally, Carolyn Baker, over here to my left, is an organizer and activist, and she's going to add to whatever I give you as her bio, is an organizer and activist with this space here, the General Baker Institute, and has been involved in political work and struggles since her earliest years. She was raised in Highland Park, Michigan, by her revolutionary parents, the late great General Gordon Baker Jr., who we mentioned earlier, and Marion Kramer, who is still and remains a lifelong activist and one of the leaders of the National Welfare Rights Union. Carolyn is a core part of the leadership of this awesome educational and political space where we've held our classes this semester. So thank you so much, Carolyn, for joining the conversation. And let's thank everybody. All right. So, with all of that framing and introduction behind us, let's start with the conversation. So the speakers know this because I gave them these questions in advance. We want to start with a few short answers, get things rolling. You can also, engage each other. So if you hear something you want to respond to, that's awesome. Maybe we'll start with Danielle with the first question, which really comes out of the conversation last week. And this notion of the individual versus the collective, I think that's a really important conversation. So I was like, well, why don't we ask our speakers, why is collective organization important to you personally as a person in the world? And wouldn't it be much easier if you just worried about yourself and your family, and maybe 1 or 2 minutes, to kind of kick us off. Thank you.
Well, yeah, thanks for that question and the introduction. Very happy to be here, but yeah, it is easier to just think about yourself, although it could be lonely, I guess. So, I mean, I think that you get a lot out of collective organizing. One of them is a sense of community and some sense of working together. But I think that, I don't know if this is part of the question, but with regards to union organizing specifically, I think that one of the reasons that this is really important is it's one of these through lines that you can have, like there's like moments when there's a lot of activity going on, maybe around, politically, and then moments when things are sort of quiet. But unions are this sort of like constant thing. You're always at work. You can always be organizing at work, and they can help you figure out how to fight or how to engage or how to kind of like deal with these smaller level confrontations, and then also build networks that you could then activate at bigger moments. And then just, this sort of connects back a little bit to what you were talking about the tension between organizing in the community and organizing at work. I think sometimes it can feel a little, it definitely feels different to be organizing at work where you have like a fixed number of people. These are the people you're working with. They're not necessarily the people you choose to socialize with or hang out with. You don't really know what their politics are. You may not really want to talk to them outside of work. But at the same time, that's where there's basic exploitation happening every day, either toward making a profit, or in the case of like someplace like Wayne State, where it's not necessarily a profit-making institution, it's being run kind of like a corporation, and things are being extracted out of the workers. You're trying to get more for less, and so that's happening every day, and it's easy. Like for a long time, just like Craig, I just sort of went to work, did my job, went home, and was like, I just didn't identify with work. But starting to look at, like, starting to organize there and pay attention to the collective, experience there, it did change the whole way I experienced work, So you start to see people for who they are in a little bit of a different way.
Awesome. Thanks for kicking us off, Danielle. We can go in this order, or, Elliot, you could jump in, or Carolyn. So, let's just mix it up. So I don't know, Elliot, did you want to do sound working? Do you want to?
Yeah. Can folks hear me right now?
Yes.
We sure can.
Oh, awesome. Great. Okay. Well, good to be here with everyone. Thank you, Craig, and to the powerful other panelists there today, Zach, Danielle, Carolyn. So good to be with everyone. And so thank you for hosting this. I think this is a really great question. And it's something that the Poor People's Campaign really has been kind of focusing on heavy, right? This collective organizing. And in fact, is what we call fusion organizing. And it's a saying that we always say, where we say, everybody in, nobody out. And to take a step back, you know, what I mean by fusion is, well, two things. You know, one is that, you know, we're stronger when we all come together. But in addition to that, how we've been organizing, how the Poor People's Campaign has been organizing, is this collective organizing across race, gender, geography, creed, color, and even class. Because we know that we're stronger when we build a movement across these various spectrums. And I think, you know, we don't have to look too far to look at our history. You know, and it's something that when I was in school, we barely learned about the Reconstruction area or the Reconstruction period, you know, right after the Civil War. But that period was such an important part of our history that I think we need to always look back to, because it was a moment where, as a nation, there was this collective organizing across race, across color, across geography, and with that came the policies that came with that. Right, we saw one of the most progressive forms of policies during that Reconstruction era. Right, when we saw state-funded public schools, and we saw labor bargaining power when it came to labor and labor rights and labor organizing. You know, we saw racial discrimination outlawed. You know, we saw these progressive policies take place because people were coming together across these various spectrums. You know, obviously that got hindered down quickly because the elitists, the bourbon class, those who were in power saw the fear of the masses, of poor and low-income people coming together to reshift the economic and political structure. But you know, in this moment, we can never forget that, and that's why in the Poor People's Campaign we always talk about this third Reconstruction. You know, because we had the first Reconstruction after the Civil War, the second Reconstruction, the Civil Rights Movement, you know, again, the voting rights, some of the economic legislations, but then got hindered back, you know, due to Reagan policies, you know, and now we're in this kind of pushing for this third Reconstruction, because we know when we all come together across this race, color, class, creed, we really, really, really can really make things happen and really shift the political and economic structure for our better lives. So yeah, that's something that I think is important when we talk about collective organizing, is this fusion organizing that is so important.
Hello? Oh, okay, I'm still here. Carolyn, you want to take a stab at this one? Not yet? Okay, all right, we're gonna go to Zach. Why collective organization, Zach? Why don't you just worry about yourself?
Yeah, so I just want to repeat again, the thanks for having us, GBI, Carolyn, and Detroit Speak. I also am obligated to mention that I'm a former student of Goldberg, Professor Goldberg, and I came to these when I was in his class, and I still have gone back and looked those videos up on YouTube for some of those topics that are great resources. So I guess I have a question for everybody. You can raise your hands. How many of you, just does this sound familiar to you? How many of you have had a job that you were unsatisfied with, that you get up every day and you dread it? Your manager's an asshole, he doesn't know what he's doing. Something along those lines, you know, I'm gonna leave, and you leave and you get another job. And then 6 months later, you're like, this manager doesn't know what the hell he's doing. I hate going to this job. I can't stand it. Does that sound familiar to anybody? Raise your hands. Okay. All right, so you left and you found that it was the same situation, right? Even when you left, right? There might be some sorts of improvements or whatever, but fundamentally, like Danielle said, you're still under that same basic site of exploitation, right? Because you still exist under capitalism. we are so programmed in our culture, right? Like Poor People's Campaign talks about this a lot, right? How we have this kind of cultural sickness where we are programmed to think so individualistically, right? Even though by our own experiences, we should know that that isn't true, that we take these individual steps to go elsewhere. You know, I'll just make it on my own. I'm smart enough, I'll make some sort of decision, right? But you can't outsmart capitalism. You can't outsmart this system you live in, right? Struggling collectively, struggling where you are. The reason why that's important is because for the vast majority of humanity, that is how we can get what we need to live dignified lives. That is how the vast majority of human improvement has been made, right? And that's not just an ideological statement. I think just that basic experience, you can tell that that's true, right? Bringing down just micro a little bit as to the answer to the question of why it's important. I was part of the group of people that helped organize MOGO, the bike share. I don't know if any see it here in Detroit. And I think just repeating what Danielle said, we're a group of people who, you know, you work together. You have that basis of relationship with one another. But through working together to solve like our collective problems, right? We became a lot closer, like in a psychological and emotional level, right? We were hanging out just after work, talking to each other, right? In ways that we never would have before, right? At that job individually, right? People, when you needed a raise, right? You needed to argue with the manager and threaten to leave every time. They never gave you more than 50 cents or, you know, a couple cents here and there, right? When we struggled collectively, we got a union contract. They gave us $1.50 raise off rip, right? The problems at that workplace that before were being mediated by just individuals arguing with management. It says you're supposed to give me this, or no, it doesn't say that, or I'm going to leave, right? Only we're really able to become effective when we struggle together. And just on the last bit, just on that kind of reason to struggle together on just a level of you as a human being, doing something, and this may be romanticizing it too much, because I think, like, as Danielle also alluded to, like a lot of the time coworkers, you know, you're not going to be friends with them. You know, this guy says stuff that is so cringe all the time, or has a set of interests that I, you know, don't care about at all, right? Or whatever, right? But when we did a march on our boss, right, and we said, you know, you have a union, we're asking you to recognize us voluntarily, right? We've all signed cards. We want you to recognize your union and negotiate with us. That was the scariest shit I had done in my entire life. We're pretty close to it. And I'm pretty sure this is for everybody else, right? But I was okay, despite doing it, because I was doing it collectively. I think it was the same for everybody else. So you find a degree of your own humanity and just like basic dignity and taking some power back where you at work or where you live or whatever your side of struggle is when you struggle collectively. Yeah, it's just it. So,
thank you, Zach. That's great. Carolyn, you want to bring us home on this question?
Sure, I'll try. So this is very awkward. I have multitasking here. Zach already answered the question for me, so can I just say that and then pass it? No, but no, like everything, like you said, everything about this society wants you to be individual. And so I guess I'll use, since we're speaking from where we're organizing, I guess I'll use the General Baker Institute, for example. I have quit 1,000 times, and I quit almost every day I'm in here. And my aunt quits every often too. Even though we don't have a staff, we quit all the time. But if we are, you know, if we were just doing it alone, you know, the doors wouldn't be open, you all wouldn't be here. This space wouldn't be what it is if it had not been for a collective. So we have a collective. We're able to do this only because of that reason. And like I said, we have our days where we all just quit and hold each other down and someone's knocking on a door, I like earlier, I'll give an example of earlier. I was literally laying on a cot in the middle of the room here, what we call the ghetto coffee shop, tired, exhausted. People were knocking on the door because I told them I'll meet with them. Matter of fact, I think someone was here yesterday and saw that I was just exhausted. But, you know, the collective, my aunt, my sister, others step in and say, look, Carolyn's sleeping, leave her alone. And I'll tour you around, and I'm just laying in there snoring and sleeping. So, but everything we do here is because of a collective, and not just the folks you see, as the folks behind the scenes as well, that you don't get to see. I guess that's the best I can answer that. And I'll tell you more about why a collective is important as we talk. I don't know if you saw me on YouTube, but oh well.
Thank you, Carolyn. Yeah, Carolyn is organizing a lot here, so we appreciate you joining the conversation. So since we took a little bit longer for the first question, for the second short answer question, and I love all you, but shorter answers, because you're going to get to go deeper, right? And you get to go deeper after that. It's all good. And we want skills and tools. So hopefully you saw the second question, which is like, if you could in a minute or less, each of you, what is one tool or skill that you've gained as an organizer in your life that you want us to put into our toolbox? So pick one and describe it for a minute. And you can always elaborate more in your longer remarks.
Okay,
So go ahead.
yes. So this is banal, but I think the most useful thing is just the one-on-one conversation, like relationships. A second thing, I know we're just supposed to say one, but it's like running meetings, which is something that I hate doing, but picking up tips from wherever about how to run meetings are key. But I think in terms of organizing, just talking to people and like listening to them and figuring out how to get them to do things, but then also figuring out when you're talking to different people who have similar issues and connecting them together. I feel like this is actually kind of a key thing in organizing every day.
Awesome. Zach, go ahead. We'll go to Elliot.
Yeah.
Zach first.
Okay.
No.
I messed up. Elliot. Go ahead.
Rock, paper, scissors. I would say, great question. I think one of the things that I always think about is, I think it's always important to always take a step back and decompress, analyze, and document. I think too often times, for me, I don't do that enough, especially when we have huge organizing drives, mobilization drives. Too often times, like for me, I get so in the weeds of the work, like the one-on-ones, the emails, the phone calls, doing all that. But seldom do I rarely take a step back and say, wow, like we really like fucking did it. Like, or we did this, or we like did that, or, just really taking a step to both analyze like the work that you're doing, analyze the political moment in which you're in, take a step to decompress and be like, okay, like I need to take time to just, take a step and take everything in, and also document, because you never know when all the stuff that you write down or you put into writings will be helpful for later, for yourself or for others. And so that's kind of those three things that I think is so helpful, is to decompress, analyze, document, especially when you're really like in the thick of it and you're really like in the works and in the weeds.
Those are great. Carolyn? And then Zach first. All right, sorry.
Okay. I think a piece of advice, similar to Danielle, is to solicit questions and answer them collectively. That's from I think the newest issue of Labor Notes. It was that was in there. But is that you have to answer people's questions, right? When you're doing something, especially something that puts them at risk, you can't just demand that people do things, right? And you need to answer them in a way that is respectful and serious, and hopefully some sort of collective answer, not just individual.
Thank you. Zach, I'm gonna bring the microphone.
No. I gotta stand on the
All right.
He's always trying to be helpful, but it's not really helpful. All right. By the way, what's the question? Because I'm multitasking. What was the question?
The question was just if there was a specific tool or skill you've gained as an organizer you want to share with us.
A tool or skill that I've gained as an organizer. Yes, and so I guess, one thing is, if you all aren't organizers or become organizers, everybody's gonna throw a book at you. Read this, that. I got a whole bunch of books in there stacked. I haven't read any of them, but I'm going to read them. So just nod and say, yeah, read the back of it or something. So next time you see them, you can say, yeah. So that's one skill. Check in with people. Not because, I mean, yes, you want to check in with people. People, I know, especially now, just aren't doing okay. Make it a habit just to check in with people, even when you don't need them. You know what I'm saying? And not because you want something for them or you're expecting something for them. Just make it a life skill of checking in with people. I know your parents probably tell you, call home. Shock them sometimes. Not that you're trying to organize them to do anything, just make it a habit, okay? But it will help when it comes to organizing. Let's see, what else? Yeah. Oh, and this whole idea of meeting people where they are. Am I not on screen? Oh, that's good. What about, I'm probably on screen now. Meeting people where they are. Another thing, a lot of people are gonna say that, yeah, we meet people where they are. But then as soon as they walk in the door, they like, did you read such and such and such and such? Or Karl Marx said this, that. And yeah, Val, please don't mess it up. And they're not really meeting them where they are. You know what I'm saying? Have a conversation. Where are they coming from? What are they interested in? Try to figure that out and then see if there's some way, because if you've read all those things, then you should know them well enough not to be verbatim and repeating everything you read in the book. So yeah, I guess that's all I have.
Thank you, Carolyn. Thank you. That's great. Those are great answers. Pardon me. So now we're going to go deeper into each of our speakers' sort of organizing lives and spheres, whichever they are. And we're going to hear from each speaker. And just to make it easier, we're going to actually go in this order now. So Danielle, then Zach, then Elliot, then Carolyn. And so I'm going to time you, and we're going to just sort of gently encourage you to stick to the 8 to 10 minutes.
Okay.
And then not so gently, I'm going to go, yo, when you got 2 minutes left.
Okay.
And then let's turn it over to Danielle. So each of these folks have some awesome stories to share, and we invited them to kick and think about some of their own organizing struggles to share with us. So Danielle, please.
Okay, thank you. Yes, so I thought my name is Danielle. I thought I'll start off by just explaining a little bit about how I got into this situation I'm in the union, being president of the union right now. Because like Craig, I started off, like I said earlier, I started off just working at Wayne State. I've been there since 2008. I teach graphic design in the art department. And for the first like 5 years, I just was like, I just teach there and I go home. I take care of my students. I try to take care of the spaces, but I was kind of like, didn't really identify with Wayne State, or like every year I was like, will I keep teaching here? I don't know. You know, I'm just here. But then at a certain point, I wanted to actually get involved with the union because I belonged to the union, but I knew I belonged to the union, but our union didn't really have a there, or it was like, there's like the president of the union was sort of this visible figure, but like, I didn't really know what we really did besides negotiate contracts. And so I became a representative of the art department and started going to these monthly meetings, and they felt like Wayne State meetings, which is to say like, you know, alienating. Like Wayne State meetings always felt alienating to me because you're just sort of sitting around and everyone's being polite, but you just feel like people are like not really there. Like they're looking at you and talking, but they're like not fully present. But then in the union meetings, people would complain about parking. And I was like, okay, they're actually complaining about their job. Like they're talking about the elephant in the room, which is that there's problems at work, you know? So I feel like otherwise it's always like these hushed conversations, but when you're in a meeting space, everything's very like civil or whatever. So I was like, okay, this feels materially different than like other types of meetings, even though the most exciting thing people talked about in those meetings was parking issues, like complaining about parking. But I was like, there's potential here. So, but so then and also all along the way, I started to find out about labor notes and kind of, you know, started to think more critically about the role unions could play. So then I got more involved with the coalition of unions when COVID hit, and like our campus is almost fully unionized, but we have all these different unions. And that was another issue that I saw. I was like, I'm in the faculty union, but then the guy whose office is next to mine is IT staff. So he's in UAW, it's called PNA. So we're different unions, but which it's great that we're all unionized, but I was like, we should all be like working together because we're all dealing with the same problems. So a year into the pandemic, they laid off a bunch of IT staff, including the guy who managed our graphic design labs. And I was like, what the hell how are we supposed to teach? A, but B, these people have been working their asses off throughout the pandemic to get us all online, and now they're being laid off. And it was almost like they picked the best person, the most critical person, and like laid them off, for my program. So that's when I just was like, we need to get these things moving, because we knew those layoffs were happening, or we knew they were coming, but I felt like we hadn't really like prepared for them. So then about a year ago, I in some different conversations decided to run for president of the union, partly because someone else was going to run, and they were like, and I was like, wow, amazing. Imagine if we had a different president, because we've had the same president for 20 years. It's just been going in this one direction. And so once that planted that seed that we could have a different type of union, I was like very excited. But then that person decided not to run. So then I was like, okay, I'll do it. But I didn't feel prepared. I had never served on the executive board of the union. I didn't feel like I knew labor law, and it really felt like you had to know a lot to go into this role. And I will say, I was underprepared for this role. It's been one of the hardest, like biggest learning curves that I've really ever had. But maybe it's better sometimes not to know what you're throwing yourself into. Because I probably wouldn't have done it, but I sort of campaigned, and it was just confusing all around, because like nobody had ever challenged this person really, or people had challenged, but like no, our elections were never contested. It was always just like, you're trying to find someone to go be in the union. Nobody wants to serve in these roles. So nobody knew what to do, because I was like trying to share literature and stuff, and they were like, what is happening? So, and then I won, which was also confusing. And everyone was like, what now? We've had the same person in power for 20 years, and we've done things the same way all this time. And I kind of came in having, watched the Chicago Teachers Union strikes and had all these ideas about how we should be more member organized. And I've been trying, so for the last year, I'm just trying to prevent the wheels from falling off, just like keep things going. Like I don't want to mess up what we had that did work. But just in the last like 3 minutes, I'll sort of talk a little bit about an organizing sort of success that we had. I think was that, okay, I have 5 minutes, okay. So, so then I kind of came in, and then you're like, you've got all these ideas, but then there's just all these like daily things to tend to, like daily problems people are having. But then in November, we got a message that the dean of the School of Medicine was proposing to cut the salaries of the faculty in the School of Medicine by up to 50%. It was going to be dependent on how much research money they bring in, because they're responsible for basically bringing in like NIH grants and things like that. And in 2020, this new dean, when he was new, had already restructured the salaries of all these physicians so that they were paid much less at Wayne State. And like, he kind of cut their benefits way down, and the union had reacted, but in the way that we had reacted in the past, where it was like the president of the union sent some angry letters, but like and he was very militant, but like he kind of operated alone, right? So nothing really happened. So when I felt like this just like landed on our doorstep, they're going to cut the salaries again. And so I was like, okay, here's the test of like organizing or whatever. So we started having some meetings with people in the School of Medicine. And some of these people didn't know one another before. They hadn't really had conversations together. Like only 50% of the people in School of Medicine are actually union members. So we were also kind of getting people to join the union at the same time. And we basically, we organized a town hall, and there was a survey around like people's feelings around the School of Medicine. And we worked really hard to get 50% of people in the School of Medicine to fill out the survey, which I was like, this is a low number, but it's a lot higher than, I guess it's high for online surveys, and everyone was telling us doctors never check their emails, like this is high, we should be happy about this. And so I shouldn't say it was a low number, because it was a high number. It took a lot of work, but it pulled this group together, and basically they backed off of cutting the salaries, and we got the dean ousted, which was like, so then, yeah, that was a total, I don't know, it was sort of shocking. But the whole time I had these misgivings of like what Zach was alluding to was I was like, okay, well, you get one dean out. It's not like the new guy is going to be so much better. I mean, he's still going to be under the same pressure to cut costs and cut salaries and everything like that. But in the meantime, we have this group going now, and then now it's just a question of like, how do you maintain that? Like, where do we go from here? And also, how do you kind of radicalize doctors? That's another question. Like, how do you sort of radicalize like high-paid people? But I think, I like to think that this kind of project helps people see the power of the union and the way that, you don't have to always like look to the boss or look to someone in power to kind of solve your problems for you, which is I think how it seems in the past. So, I'll pass it to Zach.
All right, thank you. So thank you, Daniel. So Zach is, as we're going to hear, Zach is coming from a very, very different kind of workplace with a whole different kind of origin to the whole story. So let's turn over to Zach.
Yeah. Also, I went over last time because I misread the email and I thought I had way more, rather than 1 or 2 minutes, I thought I had 5. So, yeah, so my background is a little bit different than Danielle's. I'm a 4th generation trained to do this. So like people in my family are just everybody's in a union, right? People have been organizing unions. So I had the benefit of kind of just knowing that this was always something I wanted to get involved in. When I went to Wayne State, I got my degree in labor and employment relations, right? My undergrad. So that helped immensely, just at least intellectually. Now the actual skills involved is totally different. Intellectually knowing, I think unions are important, right? About, I think, a couple months into the pandemic, I was working at Labor Notes like 15 hours a week. So I needed a second job. I had some people at DSA point me towards this place, Mogo, bike share. I'd done mostly blue collar jobs my whole life. And so I jumped on it. I decided, this is a place I want to, I'm driving a van, maybe I'll learn to repair some bikes. So I went there. When I got there, we found immediately one of my coworkers was openly talking to me about wanting to form a union. And so a organizing effort started to get underway very quickly. As somebody who was new there and didn't know everybody, ended up relying an awful lot on this guy, right? Who had been there, who was one of the most senior people there. I think for myself, the work that I was doing, picking up bikes and doing minor repairs, learning station things, right? It's the same thing, like for myself even, right? Having all that background, still thinking, I don't know, is this that bad, right? But as time goes on, the BS builds up, right? Even in the, for everybody, right? People were just getting angrier and angrier, right? I came in at kind of just a fortuitous time, right? So we started talking to one another. I think as I alluded to earlier, just about everybody was like on the edge of quitting. Everybody was like, I need a raise. No, some people, they got it. Everybody was hired in at different wages, right? In the middle of this pandemic, all of us were working. All of us were having to deal with customers, getting exposed. People were getting COVID without health insurance, right? Without hazard pay, right? Our employers were getting grants from the government to continue operations, but we weren't getting any of that, right? Every single person there had a second job, right? Myself included. So the material conditions there, just, I don't know, everybody you put up with for so long, something about the pandemic, about the hypocrisy of this company kind of really projecting itself as super progressive and, oh yeah, we're Detroit, company really started to build. Using my contact with this guy, although I didn't have a lot of those relationships, he did, right? And was able to introduce me to people and was very, between the two of us, that was very trusting of him, right? To kind of lean on these people that he saw every day and say, like, hey, I think we should listen to this guy. He did a lot of those works, so that it helped me build a relationship with my coworkers, right? As time went on. Besides that, during this whole period, I was also involved with DSA, and there was kind of a synergy between me talking with a lot of Democratic Socialist America people who were doing similar work. And I had a space that I could go to where I'm like, I talked to this person and it didn't seem to work, right? And so I had people to soundboard off. Yeah, I talked to a person just like that, right? And I did this, right? And it went this way. Or, ooh, I think this person, are they, going to tell us to the boss? Well, I don't totally know what to do about that. Does somebody else experience that, right? I was lucky that I had an organization full of people that I could talk to and talk them through this. So that when we built up to finally doing a march on the boss, we managed to get every single person in the workplace to sign a union card without them knowing. Yeah, all of us did a march on the boss. We said, handed them our petition and said, we've all signed cards. We filed for an election at the National Labor Relations Board. We want you to negotiate with us. And our local manager, God love her, said, of course you're recognized without any authority to do so. And they made us go to election anyways. Yeah, from there, negotiate a contract. Something that employers do is that all employers do, if they don't run an anti-union campaign, or feel that it's too late, they'll try and stretch it out on a contract, right? Negotiation. So energy fades, people quit, people who are all mad and ready to take action suddenly get told, no, right? You got to go through this process. We got to spend 3 weeks negotiating these points of the contract that you don't care about that much, right? No, let's do things we can agree on easily first, So let's say pay the thing you actually care about until the very end, right? Several months down the line, things kept building. There were layoffs during the winter, so now everybody's on not only not getting paid as unequally all the problems that were there before we started negotiating, but also people are working less hours. And finally it got to a point that we're like, all right, we got to let them know we need action. So we said, we're talking about pay. This is our last best offer, or we're going to do a rally, which for this company, I encourage you to go look at their website. They push the progressive Detroit thing super, super hard. We're going to embarrass you in front of a bunch of your supporters and officials and stuff. And their wage offer before then had been 15 cents, and they bumped it to $1.50 when they figured out that we were serious. Yeah, we got a union contract, and I was union steward there for like 6 months before I ended up going full-time at Labor Notes to help plan the conference in June.
You got 2 minutes.
2 minutes? Okay. Oh yeah, okay, yeah, so I guess we could talk about Labor Notes, which, so I think you said you mentioned it before?
I think it's been introduced, but most people probably don't. Tell us.
Okay, yeah, and Labor Notes is a long time labor magazine, and I guess just organization that helps build networks across different labor unions. They have a big conference in June that is, I think it's probably the largest gathering of trade unionists in the hemisphere. I think that takes place on any kind of regular basis. There were like 3,000 people there last time. they do trainings and kind of help keep track of the whole labor movement in the United States, right? From a perspective of the rank and file, right? Throughout this whole series, I'm sure you've heard about all the problems that are happening within the labor movement. Labor Notes, as an organization, tries to trust rank and file workers to make those changes amongst each other, right? Amongst themselves in the movement. And yeah, they do trainings, which you can go to help you do that, and a whole bunch of other stuff, but I'm running out of time. So, and yeah, you can ask me questions about it. Also, I think we got Jane there has got a lot of copies of the magazine if people just want to take it, and brochures to the conference. So,
all right, thank you, Zach. That was great. Yeah. All right, we're going to turn it over to Elliot, who's going to bring us into a whole different sphere in many ways of organizing. But you also mentioned that you've networked with labor unions, so maybe you'll tell us more about this fusion strategy. And so, take it away, Elliot.
Great. Yeah, so I think this session that we're talking about, right? This organizing where you are is so fitting to the Poor People's Campaign. Given that we have poor and low-income people across race, across gender, across all spectrums, really doing the groundwork from the bottom up, organizing where they are within their communities. And then with that, with the time that I have, I want to play up that a 5-minute video, if that's okay, that really speaks to both the organizing where you are, but also kind of speaking to the collective organizing that we talked about on this panel, both the collective struggles, but also the building power across these different bases to really address the issues that we're facing. So I'm going to play a quick 5-minute video, if that's okay, to really just kind of bring the context into the work of the Poor People's Campaign. And then coming out of that, then I'll just talk about a little bit of my work and how we're building this Poor People's Campaign. So give me 1 second. I'm going to play it right now. Let me share my screen. All right. Are folks able to see this? Hold on, let me see if I can get this full video. Are folks able to see this?
Okay. Yes, we can see it.
Okay, great. I'm gonna play this.
I worked 41 years in the coal mines. I have black lung, and it's just unfathomable what these poor coal miners have to go through in order to get what they have worked for and deserve.
At one time, poverty was a temporary condition. You were on a down slope for a minute, but you could bounce back up. We can't bounce back up today. It's permanent. We're not going back to the factory and building cars and trucks like we once did.
A job working at McDonald's or the grocery store doesn't pay enough for one person to live.
We work a 40-hour work week, still not enough. Living from paycheck to paycheck. Rent is $600 a month. We got water bill, electricity. I do this for my kids, and it hurts.
I'm 46 years old. I've lived in poverty here in West Virginia every day of my life. And I'm working. I am a working poor with a bachelor's degree. I'm doing the best I can with what I have.
We're in the height of mass water shutoffs. This entire neighborhood was shut off all at one time.
I saw all of my neighbors get shut off right in front of me. It was kind of terrifying. I'm 42 years old, and I'm a cashier at McDonald's. I had lost my house. You're welcome to come inside. There's a lot of people that are living in their cars. You never notice until you're in the same situation.
I have stuff to give my children. I'm paying all these bills, and they need school clothes and stuff. They be asking me for it, I can't give it to them.
Now I'm a Kansas farmer's wife. Kansas farmers are committing suicide. Why? They're usually in debt up to their eyeballs.
I see poverty in my own community. There's a 70% unemployment rate in the reservation right now.
Here in New York City, we're home to millionaires and billionaires, and we have so many people living in the streets, and that's just not right.
I've been a homeless veteran twice. lived in a shelter.
I've been living down here since I was 17.
My only chance of going to college was joining the Army. We are demanding that we stop the war on our poor.
700,000 people in this country are on the verge of losing their food stamps. This budget calls for shrinking the social safety net programs like Medicare.
I just know that everything that's happening to us isn't right.
I'm in stage 5 of kidney disease. I fell behind on my health care and they canceled my health insurance and they told me I have to wait until open enrollment. There's only 5 stages of kidney disease and I'm in the 5th stage. And murder, it's murder. You know, if you ask me, it's murder.
I lost a son to gun violence. And I lost a daughter. No parent should have, in America, should have to bury their child for lack of medical attention. I'm wailing because my children
My God.
are no more. My God. I'm well. I'm wailing out. Wailing. Cause my babies ain't no more. How many more babies? How many more children?
No more. I want you to know that when hands that once picked cotton join hands of Latinos, join hands of progressive whites, join faith hands and labor hands and Asian hands and Native American hands and poor hands and wealthy hands with a conscience and gay hands and straight hands and trans hands and Christian hands and Jewish hands and Muslim hands and Hindu hands and Buddhist hands. When we all get together, we are an instrument of redemption. When we join hands, we can revive and make sure that the promise of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness and equal protection under the law is never taken away from anybody. So I got a question. Are the rejected ready to revive and declare that this land is your land, this land is my land, this land is our land, and together from the State House to the White House, the rejected are going to demand that this nation never give up on being one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So, oh, let me turn this off. Give me 1 second. There we go. So I just wanted to show, just kind of just visualize what the Poor People's Campaign is, just for the context. And it's pretty much what folks on this panel have talked about, right? What Zach has talked about, where it's not right that we're working 2 or 3 jobs just to make it by. It's not right that we pay so much for affordable for housing. You know, it's not right that, you know, this country spends 65 cents of their discretionary dollar on militarism and the war economy, but only 15 cents when it comes to social programs. So the Poor People's Campaign, part of the work that I'm doing, part of the work that we're all doing, and a lot of the folks that you saw on that video are organizing within their communities. They're organizing where they're at. They're collectively organizing, right? Building this tent across spectrums, right? Where I've talked to coal miners in West Virginia that I didn't even know would be organizing with, you know, people of color in Wisconsin, you know, and people of color in Wisconsin organizing with the Apache Stronghold in Arizona. And so it's just this fusion that's coming together. Part of the work that we're doing in the Poor People's Campaign is building power, right? Building this collective power across these spectrums, impacting policies and elections, and most importantly, shifting the narrative around poverty, right? Talking about that what puts people in poverty is the policies, right? It's the policy decisions that is occurring both on the state level, the local level, folks in Congress, rather than the misconception of our own moral failures. And so we're changing that narrative and really kind of focusing on it's the policies, right? It's this capitalistic system that puts us in these places. And so, you know, with that being said, one of the things that we're doing, right, is really shifting this narrative around poverty. And it's the graphic that I showed on that video where, if y'all saw, we're 140 million poor and low income people. There are 140 Americans who are poor or low income in the United States. That is almost half of this country, 43.5% before COVID. So you can only imagine how many fell to poverty during this time. And so it's one of those things where we change that narrative. We're in this country, we operate off an old, outdated poverty measure that the government uses, where they measure based on household income, but they don't measure based on the other indicators, right? Those other indicators that put us into poverty, right? Where we're one healthcare crisis to fall into poverty, one natural disaster falls us into poverty, one emergency that falls into poverty. That pool of people is large and it's vast, and it's 100 million plus the 40 million that is already in poverty. And so we're shifting that narrative, really opening up and putting a face on these issues, and so what you saw in that video are poor and low income people, those that are impacted, speaking on their own behalves, right? A platform where not people speaking on other people's behalves, but people speaking on their own behalves, on the struggles that they are facing and the solutions that need to be done to address these issues. And so part of my work has been helping to build the Poor People's Campaign. I've done outreach with some of the labor unions within the past couple of years, working with SEIU, our partners there, the Fight for 15, working with some of our other partners, AFL-CIO, and also CWA. But I think kind of, putting that into today, we're part of my work is again building this campaign, and we're driving into this June 18th mass assembly, which I would love to invite those that are in this room to attend in Washington, D.C., where we're really gonna nationalize and internationalize all the struggles that are occurring, folks speaking on their behalves, and talking about the solutions that need to be done on June 18th, 2022. Again, would love folks to join as we really build this movement to address the interlocking injustices of systemic racism, poverty, militarism, the war economy, ecological devastation, and this distorted moral narrative of religious nationalism, where you have extremists and you have elected officials that hijack religion, hijack morality for their own political purposes and their own political gain. So that's a little bit about my work. But yeah, just wanted to share both the kind of the context of the Poor People's Campaign, how we're operating, and how we're moving forward, and how we're building this fusion movement of how we talked about this collective organizing and organizing where you are, where you're at. I don't think I could hear. Oh, there we go. Awesome. Thanks.
This is a high-tech operation. There we go. Can you hear now, Elliot? Yes, awesome.
Yes, thanks.
How much time? I cut into some of my time. That's good. All right, so yeah, I like that I'm sitting on his shoulder, like the little devil and the little angel and that stuff. I don't know which one I would be, but yeah. So the Institute, a lot of the students I've already talked to about this, but I'll mention it again. we are young, the General Baker Institute. General Baker was not young. His comrades, some of them sitting up front, are not young. They're young at heart. They might be young in practice, but in theory, they're much older, right? But we're young. And so we have made a couple of mistakes and we'll make a whole bunch more. I'll start off by saying that. We don't pretend we know what we're doing. We haven't figured that out. I'm not sure if we'll ever figure it out. But this is the General Baker Institute. We have 4 pillars. Let me try to make sure I remember our pillars. Internationalism, projects of survival, arts and culture, and political and popular education. That was 4, right? Okay, so 4 pillars, those are 4 pillars. And we try to push propaganda through all 4 of those pillars. And so what does that look like? So for instance, we have, when we do tours, I'll just break it down as if I'm doing a tour. You just walked into the building, we're standing up front, there's a cross on the floor, you're like, am I in a church? No, we got this building from a church. This was actually Mays Printing, the first Black printing company in the city of Detroit. But we got it from a church. So that's the front. So we're standing in the front, and what we tell people is everything outside these doors and outside these walls is trying to divide people. Okay, but when you come in here, what we are trying to do, I'm not sure if we're doing it, but what we're trying to do is to bring folks together. And so when I go back to that meeting people where they are, so what that looks like, or what that sounds like, it sounds really great, right? But that is one of the most difficult things to do and practice. And so meeting people, if you're gonna say you're in a place that meet people where they are, that means that's people who come in here with different ideology of you, who you wouldn't normally even have conversation with, who you would probably walk past and never, like, I'm glad I'll never have to see this person again. Those are people who come in here. You'll hear certain conversations that you're like, did they just say what the fuck? I think they said it. And they probably did, but this is a place for everyone. If we can agree what we say in here, and when you're still up front, if we can agree that people are not doing well and that we are losing, then you can come in here. Maybe we can agree on some other things eventually. But if we can start there, then that's a good start. And so you might come in here and on any given day and realize, like, and hear conversations that are difficult ones, or you might hear conversations that are good ones that you want to be a part of. So that's one thing. I guess we try to also be a place for organizations to have meetings. We are a place where individuals, we're not just trying to cater to organizations. We like individuals as well. I know some people are like, I won't deal with such and such if they're not a part of organization. Well, we will. And so we're not saying you gotta be in one or you don't ever, maybe eventually you'll get to one, you might not. But this is the place for you. And so we have different projects. When I say about that propaganda, I guess we have the community garden that we have next door. And the idea is not to just have a garden because that's so nice and people are doing gardens and stuff like that. The idea is to try to, well, if you look or if you drove here, if you ride around here, there's not a lot of grocery stores, one, right? And so produce is not something that you can easily accessible around here. But the idea is not for people just to take, but actually see themselves being a part of something, building something. And so help pull a weed while you take, water, do something, right? So that's a part of that project of survival. And then eventually we hope to get signs out there that says, I got to talk to the collective, that the name of the garden will be each according to their needs. And so I would love that to be the name of the garden, and then maybe we can have a conversation off of that. We have arts over there. We do a clothing line, and we call it Popular Ed Thread. It's a way of doing education through clothes. And so we try to reach people through that way. We have classes like this. We have programs like this. We have reading groups, all trying to have conversation and eventually push some kind of propaganda. We have community sewing circles, we have community knitting circles, and we don't necessarily get into political conversations in those. We're just people teaching each other skills. So skill sharing project, we have podcasts, just trying to get people in the door. But what I will say has been a difficult thing is, yes, we have to keep the lights on, but some people just can't afford it. But if you can offer, like if you can barter, the idea of bartering is very difficult for people. Everything out there tells you that you have to pay. You have to pay this with money. You have to do this with money, or you can't do it. And so people think that they're being scammed when we say, if you can't afford it, then maybe you can help us do something. What are your other skills? And so that's difficult. That's been difficult for people to grasp. And I think the longer we're gonna be here, people will see that we're not trying to scam them, because they would rather pay and get taken and get robbed and stuff than to come in and try something different. And that's just a reality. And so we have to work through that, and that's what we're trying to do. We're part of the Poor People's Campaign. We try to just get in any spot that we can, and try to check on people, have intergenerational conversations. We just trying some of everything. Like I said, we don't know what's going to stick, but hopefully some of these things will stick. Yeah, and we don't have staff. So I said that again, so I do.
Thank you, Carolyn. Thank you so much. Great to get better. We've been coming to this class, been coming to the space for the past month, and I think we've gotten a sense of it. But it's really important to understand that there are strategies and approaches and techniques around what this place is trying to do, where it is at. And so now we're going to open it up, and just a couple of things to keep in mind. The mics that you see up there, when you get up to speak into them with your question or comment, you won't hear it come through the speakers, but it does go through the super duper high tech stuff. So the YouTube people hear it. So you'll be like, is this on? And it's like, it is on, you just can't hear it.
Speak up.
But yeah, speak up in the mic so the YouTube folks and others can hear you. Also, try and keep your questions or comments. We got a lot more people here today. This is great, to a minute or 90 seconds if you can, just so we can get as many people speaking as possible. And so I think what would work best is we take 2 or 3 comments, questions, and come back up and see who wants to field those, and then kind of go ping pong, that kind of thing. So anybody who wants to get up, we encourage folks who maybe haven't had a chance to raise a question or a comment yet in the class to start. And so who would like to start with a question or comment? We have some from YouTube possibly coming as well. Yes. Or Facebook.
Let's see. This is for Wayne State.
Wayne State question.
If you know the ratio of adjunct professors versus regular professors at the college level, both across the country and specifically at Wayne State, what is their position on hiring professors, especially local African Americans, many of them educated by Wayne State University?
Well, I have to answer that in parts, I think, but I know, do I have to talk out loud?
We'll do this question, then we'll take a few from the field. That's fine, because it's a very specific question. Then we'll go.
So one thing, just the question around, nationally, I know that the last statistic I heard is that 75% of faculty nationally are contingent faculty, meaning they're not on the tenure track and they don't have tenure. So tenure is like the gold standard of job security, but it's being eroded. Not 75, so that doesn't mean though that 75% are adjunct. They might be full-time faculty that are, have like shorter term contracts. I don't know what the proportion is at Wayne State, but I do know the UPTF, the adjuncts at Wayne State are unionized, and I think there's like 400 or 500 people in that bargaining unit, and we have something like 1,200 that are full-time faculty. But as far as hiring Black faculty or members who are people who may have been educated at Wayne State, I mean, this is the thing. It's like we're constantly pushing to get more tenured faculty lines. And one of the big kind of problems in higher ed, or that people are critical of, is that when these searches happen, they're national searches. So a lot of times people who are local are actually are like not looked at. Because, but if you were to go apply for a job in Chicago, you might get looked at. So Wayne's, the odds of getting a job at Wayne State on a tenured line as a Wayne State graduate, I don't know what they are, but I would say they were probably pretty low. And there's kind of like a national conversation, I think, around how people get hired and whether there are paths for contingent faculty into these full-time lines, because a lot of times there are these pushes to get more full-time lines, but then they just go to new people, younger people from out of town or whatever, and they're not going to go to local people. So, yeah, I don't know if that's not quite an answer, but.
No, that was great. Thank you. So if you have a question or comment, go ahead and stand up, go to one of those mics, and please share it with us.
Yeah, so this question is for Danielle. I found it interesting you talking to radicalizing some of the doctors at your workplace. Can you go a little bit into what those organizing conversations look like?
Well, yes,
Can we take a couple?
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Let's just take a couple more questions or comments, and then so we got that one. You got that one in your head, Danielle. There was another question or comment, and we'll just take a few, and then we'll field them up here.
Hello, I had a general question about unions. A few years ago, I heard a lot of discourse about like how horrible police unions are, like from like the media. And I'm kind of wondering, like, how much of that should I think of, like, is that like anti-police, or is that like starting to sneak in anti-union sentiment? And if there's like a difference between like is there like a good union and a bad union in that case, or is that just a bunch of hoo-ha they're trying to pull into my ears?
That's a great question. Let's take maybe one more, and then we'll, yeah.
Yeah, my question actually tacks on to the last question he asked. And in 2010, Michigan created a right to work law, which basically means that no person can be forced to join a union in their workplace. So my question is that an appropriate solution to incompetent unions? If you feel that your interests are not being represented, should you have to keep giving someone money that you don't agree with, like the government?
These are some great questions. So we got 3. Speakers can pick one and respond however they'd like. And then we also encourage other comments from the floor. You can respond to these questions too in your comments.
Well,
Someone
else want to go tackle one of the
Elliot
other questions?
or Carolyn? Elliot, did you hear the question?
Oh yeah, I did. Yeah. I could. I could take. I could take a stab of it. Yeah. So all great questions. Yeah. So let's see. I think. Let's see where do I start. Sorry, forgive me. I was blanking out. Can you repeat? So I'm just trying to think about the first question. It was a good question, but I totally blanked off. Or I'm sorry, the second question. What was it again? Remind me. Sorry. Oh, hold on. I think you're muted.
So can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you. Yes.
One was a question about police unions. How should we make sense of police unions in the broader sense of the labor movement and good or bad unions? Another question was around right to work and how the state law in Michigan changed, which you're not in Michigan, but Michigan is now a right to work state. And what should we make of that? So you could choose one of them if you'd like.
Okay, great. Yeah, definitely. Well, in my experience, it's always important to join a union. I think that piece is so important when we come together, when we have power as workers to push the CEOs, to push those that have the power. But as workers, as people, as folks who are impacted, we have the power when we collectively come together. And I think in this moment of history, in this moment that we're living in, we're seeing that. We are seeing these organic labor movements spawn up, whether it's the Amazon workers that are fed up all across the nation. We're seeing the Starbucks workers that are fed up, that are organizing. And not only that, but organizing in these states with these state laws that are hostile to workers coming together. We see in, for example, in Alabama, the Amazon workers, were organizing heavy, and we saw the suppression of the vote. We saw Amazon manipulating the ballots, trying to maneuver and stymie the people's right to a voice. And there's a reason why they're doing that. There's a reason why they don't want to see workers come together. There's a reason why they don't want to see the people stand up, and I think to take a step back, we have to look at where we are in this moment of history, when I said a minute ago where, 140 million people are poor, low income. And then that was before COVID, 9 million people fell into poverty. At the same time, CEOs made over $2.3 trillion during the pandemic. That is not right. And they're making all this money on the backs of us as workers. And so I think, to put it all together, I think it's important that we organize together, that we're in a labor union, and that we push against those that try to exploit us. So that may not answer the question specifically, but I just wanted to kind of just share, I think, my thoughts on just kind of where we are in this moment of history.
Before we take any others, I think there's still some big questions in the room, right? Does anybody else want to respond to any of those?
Well, I can just answer about the doctors question, radicalizing doctors. I don't want to pretend like I've radicalized any doctors. They're very but it has been interesting working with them as a group, because I'm also involved with the DSA, and I've been involved with organizing talking to different types of people, and talking to doctors specifically has been new for me, because they make huge salaries, and they are very smart people, in general. I don't really know any doctors besides my own doctor. So this has been all new for me. I've been literally Googling nephrology or oncology in order to have conversations with people, but they are being exploited. I mean, the fact is their healthcare system is a disaster. Everybody knows it. And COVID has been a huge stressor on them too. And the way things were restructured with the salaries was that they're being every time they see a patient, it gets tagged in a certain way, and they make a certain amount of money depending on which patients they're seeing, which patients are on Medicaid versus Blue Cross Blue Shield. And so their income is completely tied to the type of care they give. And people go into becoming doctors because they believe in taking care of people, at some level, usually, so when you start talking about profit motives and stuff, they totally get it, And so I feel like when it's just been interesting, because I think there are also people who are, now I'm just going to generalize about doctors. They're really focused on having organized meetings. They want to know what's the point of the meeting? Why are we meeting right now? But also they're I think that I sort of lost my train of thought a little bit about it, but I feel like they're people who are used to being kind of in control. They're successful people. They've done well all through school. And then now they have a patient practice. But they too can see that the whole system is failing. So I feel like you can see education and medicine are in crisis, they don't have agency. So this is where people were just getting really fed up. They were seeing themselves just being jerked around, being told now you have to see these kind of patients, now you have to see those kind of patients. You're seeing patients back to back to back. You can't give them good care because the front desk is falling apart. People can't get in to see their patients. So there's all these things around what they do that they really care about. So I can't say that I've radicalized anyone, but I have tried to find those doctors that are more left, or kind of seem to have a more critical analysis of the work that they're doing, and then you try to bring those people together as much as possible. And then just a small comment about police unions. At Wayne State, I'm in the coalition of unions. We're in the coalition, and there is a police union. It's the public safety union, and I will say, the rep from the public safety union is a very nice person, but it was interesting during COVID to see that they were the one group of workers that was not really facing cuts. They were getting more people, and I think the problem with police unions is they're protecting often people who should not be protected. I would say, should not be protected. So we do a bit. I don't want to go overboard, but there are professors who I think also are kind of not, maybe should be having their behavior corrected or whatever, and the union is sometimes protecting them a little too much. But I think with police unions, it's, that's the problem. I think that's the case against police unions, is that they're protecting people who have actually committed violence or whatever and need to be, you know, and are not being held accountable. So.
Thank you. You want to tackle the right to work question? Zach? And add police unions too?
Yeah, I guess starting on the police unions, I'm not gonna recite what I wrote, because it's recorded, but no, I mean, yeah, I think just going on with what Danielle's really diplomatic answer, like fundamentally, if I were to try and do a strike at the gates of a plant, and like block the gates of a factory to shut it down, the cops are gonna be the ones arresting me, or if I resist them, pepper spraying me or smashing me with a baton. And their union both enables that behavior and actively celebrates it. So from the perspective of just as somebody who wants the labor movement to succeed, they're a union that protects their workers in crushing other unions, right? As one of their functions, right? Potentially, right? And also as somebody who believes in, you know, racial justice and just any kind of, I don't know, like we were all here 2 years ago, we saw what happened, right? You're brutalizing people everywhere, and their unions were an agent to allow them to do that. And not just allow them to do that, but encourage them, right? Ideologically, the majority of, some of them are like straight up fascists. It's not that much of an exaggeration, the rhetoric that they put out. So I don't know, I'm pretty sour on them. As far as the right to work, I think a lot of unions, like we've said, have a lot of problems, right? I think right to work does not help address any of those problems. It's twofold. One, I think that whatever the like micro situation is, the reason why right to work is being implemented pretty explicitly by the people who are doing it, and its net effect is to weaken the labor movement, right? Like whatever kind of like, you know, my union rep doesn't do shit for me or whatever, right? It just the aggregate effect of that socially is to try and lower union densities. They did it successfully in most of the places that it's, in a lot of places it's been done. I think unions that are going to be very, very seriously hurt by right to work are not going to then respond to that right to work legislation by becoming better. They're probably in that situation of not being able to talk to their members to convince them to join the union to get dues, right? Because they're a union that, kind of like you said, might not be as representative, right? So it's not going to like correct their behavior, right? They probably don't have the capacity to do that anyways. What it does do is for those workers there, if they do want to take a route to improve their union, right? Like, you know, if Danielle's union was crushed, Danielle couldn't have run for president and, you know, started representing those workers and started to become more militant, right? It closes off that effort, as problematic as it is, that's been built up. So I don't think it's appropriate for those reasons.
Thank you. Carolyn, do you want to add anything to any of these questions before we take a few more?
The union one, I guess. Is it worth paying dues? What did you say? What did you say in the back?
Right to work. It's about right to work.
Yeah, but you also said that some about, is it worth paying dues and stuff? Okay, so my best example I have, because I've never had a union where I worked. The places that I worked was not union places. But the best example, I guess, I have is from like the League of Revolutionary Black Workers. The union did not, UAW did not represent Black workers. Matter of fact, their slogan was UAW meant you ain't white. So the members of the League of Revolutionary Black Workers, I mean, you can talk to Zoe, who's here. He's standing up there writing. I think he's about to say so. He's about to speak. But they are the best examples I have of like when the unions wasn't representing you and being enforcing the union to do their job, you know, they ran their own candidates. And they have power in numbers, you know. And so if that's the case, then that's the route that the best history I have is, the best example I have is that history. So.
Thank you. Thank you. So let's do another round, and maybe again, if folks could stick to a minute or 90 seconds, then we'll do another. So we got one person here. Do we have anybody else who wants to maybe stand up by a mic if we know, so we know to call him?
I got a question on here after we take the question.
So please, yeah.
I want to hear the question.
No, it's for, oh, you want to hear the question?
Yeah.
The question is for Elliot. And the question is, how do folks get involved with June 18th?
The June mobilization. So that's a question we'll definitely have Elliot speak to. Let's take another one here, question or comment, and then if there's another or two out in the audience.
I got 2 points I want to make, and
make sure you speak up for me.
okay. I want to unite with the classes that I have been here, with the panelists, and especially the students and the people out in the audience. I'm extremely honored to continue the legacy of General Baker Institute. And as Carol was saying, I think one of the fundamentals is understanding the difference between propaganda and agitation. Propaganda is long range, and agitation is a part of that. And the agitation part depends upon your understanding between insubordination and insurrection. For example, what I'm saying is, when I got fired from Uniworld after working there 19 months, I was so happy to try to find out what revolutionaries was doing when they wasn't working. And so that's when I seen the drum movement and the elbow movement take the Robert Rules of Order and take them from insubordination to insurrection. I want to say in one while, but it was from one level to the next level. And the point being, at that time, it was wildcat strike. So what I'm trying to say now is that that was the industrial area of the productive force. This is the data of the Industrial Revolution proceeding to the next historical epic of the Digital Revolution, which is on our side. Let the robots do the heavy lifting. So in the meantime, I've been coughing and parking. I'm gonna say this like this. I still smoke cigarettes and I still smoke weed. And, I'm working on it. But the real point is that I got some medical issues with the prostrate, what's happening coming back from California. And I'm gonna tell you, the medical system did this here. They the ones that hooked up this old Machiavellian language to say COVID ain't a flu. And I am so disappointed in the so-called communist movement. There have been no honest papers in terms of explaining scientifically the difference between COVID and the flu, which in my opinion, as we speak, isn't a difference other than the interests of the bourgeois and the interests of the productive forces. And I can add on to that by saying,
one more,
this, and then I'm out.
Okay.
In 24 months, 10 businesses went from billionaires to trillionaires in 24 months. That's where I'm out with it. And I'm done.
All right, thank you. Thank you for your time. See long lines. Oh, I see short lines here. Go ahead.
First of all, I want to thank all of you all for attending. That's number one. And thank you for having me here. I'm one of the
Speak up a little bit more, closer to the mic. Yeah, there we go.
Oh, okay. I'm one of the old guys from the league. I want to ask a question, and I have a couple of comments. My question is to Danielle, since you're working with students every day. What is it that do you see that the students need to know? And what is it that we can give the students, and you all can also help answer this question? What is it that they need to know about what really needs to be done? That's my question to you. And my comment is this, because I'm big on principles that are good principles and that work. And part of the discussion about organizing is that, especially with your core group, and this is what we found out, the principle still applies, I think, but it has to be done differently. Always give people something to do. The bourgeois always is talking about individualism. But in real life, sports is a really good antidote for a lot of things. Look at a basketball team. Michael Jordan supposed to be one of the greatest in the world, but he can't win a championship without them other four people. Everyone has to do something to do. Football is a great example. A football team has a wide receiver coach, linebacker coach. Give people something to do. Meet them where they're at, with their talent, and give them something to do. That draws them in, and then they can draw other people in and give other people something to do. Because I like to give real live examples. And one of the examples I give, and then I'll sit down, when after the drum movement and everything, and like I told you before, what we really did was infiltrate that union. And one of the things we did is, and this goes to this question about bad unions and white workers stuff, part of the problem is checks and balances. The checks and balances went away. Part of the big problem is accountability, and that goes all the way from the halls of Congress to CEO. Accountability is something that has to be taken account of and has to be dealt with. One of the things, again, just a practical example. After the drum movement, one of the things that was instituted at Dye Vane, and I worked at Dye Vane for a while, I became the co-chairman of our union. Now, what that meant was we had different departments, and each department had a union. And so therefore, by me being a co-chair of my unit, we had meetings every 2 weeks. We had to get around and go around and get feedback from all of the people in our unit on the line. And so they would have grievances, some of them legitimate, some of them not, but you still have to listen to them. You got to be held accountable. And so that every 2 weeks, people were drawing in. Well, what do you think, man? Blah, blah, blah. So we would have a meeting once a month, a big meeting once a month, but we would have these little mini meetings among ourselves. So there was accountability built in all the way down the line. That left. As we got older, as the movement dissipated, because actually demands were met all across the country, and people thought electing all these black officials was going to help, and it did to an extent. But then it became like everything else. And that's why you have to be careful with even the ones that are progressive now. If they don't get the kind of backing that they need, if there's not a mass movement that's going on to make them accountable, then a lot of times they just slip and slide right up into the whole thing. And I'll leave you with this. Franklin Delano Roosevelt made one of the most astute things that he ever said was this: I will only do what I'm made to do. If you want these things, create a movement to make me do them. I'll leave it there.
So those are some great comments and a few questions built in. Do we want to take any responses to what we just heard from the speakers? And then we're going to kind of move towards some final thoughts after we, any responses to what you just said?
Yeah, well, just on your last comment, I completely agree, that you need a movement behind anything. And I think I didn't really, you always hear people say, or you don't always hear people that say that, but I've heard people say that before. But since in the last 6 months, I've been in this role, I've noticed that sometimes people want me to just go talk to the dean or the president and solve the problem. But I'm like, I don't have power. I have power because y'all are there, and you're demanding this thing and you need to be visible. And that's the only thing that's kind of pushing me, really, so not the only thing, but I feel like it really is true that if you have a mass movement behind something, that's the main way you can change things. And then as far as what I try to teach, or what I think students need to know, I teach graphic design, and it's a very kind of, it's a very skill-based thing. You learn how to basically plug right into the workplace. Like, you learn to ideally you're graduating, you've got this skill set, you can get an entry-level job doing graphic design work. And so I teach, one of the things I try to teach is just the students to kind of, I guess, recognize how they're going to be exploited, and just try to kind of prepare them so that they can go into the workplace armed with the knowledge that it's not going to be all, not that people think it's going to be like rainbow and unicorns, but you kind of do. You kind of are like, once I have the skill, I'll have this nice office job and I'll be able to be a creative. But I'm like, you're going to go in and people are going to want you to work weekends, etc. And I just try to kind of prepare them in a way for the workplace. I don't know if that's exactly what you were kind of asking about, what students need. I will say in my class, I always show, as an example of good graphic design, the issues of the South End newspaper from when the League took it over and they printed the newspaper at Wayne State and then just distributed it to factories, because they said one class conscious worker is worth 100 students. So that was a ballsy moment. And I show that it's not really, it is an example of graphic design, but I just insert it into my graphic design lectures as a moment in Detroit's design history.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Okay, yeah, well, I was about to say two things to answer that last question. I think will be helpful to students. And then the two things is, one is change never just happens because it happens, right? There's always been some sort of organizing or some sort of reaction that has forced people to change. And I think one of the things, if you look back in history, it kind of goes to what the last question was raised, with FDR, A. Philip Randolph pushed FDR, right, to enact civil rights agenda and legislation, right? In the 1960s, right, Lyndon Baines Johnson, said, "Oh, my hands are tied. I can't get this done. I can't get this voting rights thing done. I'm stalled." Dr. King, John Lewis, my great aunt Amelia Boynton pushed LBJ to enact voting rights legislation, right? To enact some economic policies during the 60s. And so it's always been this kind of pushing our elected officials, pushing those in power, pushing our CEOs who continue to exploit us, really kind of pushing those that are in power to enact change. That's the one piece. And then the other piece is, if you look at history, a lot of the changes that has been made, has been the work of students, right? Has been the work of young adults, right? If you look at, again, the 1960s, SNCC, John Lewis, those folks, and even before that, you look at the Greensboro sit-ins, you look at the Nashville sit-ins, you look at all those sit-ins, it was students, it was young folks, right? Rising up, saying that we can't live like this. Like we have to change these policies. We have to shift the narrative. And so I think oftentimes we don't realize how much power we really have as students, and when we rise up, when we coordinate together, when we organize together, when we talk together, we can enact change, and we've seen that throughout history in the civil rights movement. We've seen that during the Vietnam War protests. We've seen that even recently with the climate change protests, with the March for Our Lives. It's really been the students, the young folks that have set the agenda, that have shaken the consciousness of this nation to wake up and say, hey, we don't want to live like this. We can't live like this. So I think those two pieces are very important that I think we always got to keep with us. And then the last piece, how to get involved in June 18th, kind of ties into kind of all of what we're saying, right? Of this organizing where we are. So, two things is, RSVP on the website to sign up. You'll get all the information of how to do that. It's just that's one piece is RSVP, and then the second thing is we've been asking folks to sign up as mobilizing captains. And what we mean by that, again, it kind of speaks to what we're saying, right? Is organizing where you are. And mobilizing captains is leading a delegation. And I'm not saying that as an intimidating thing, but leading a delegation could just be, contacting a couple of your friends, or contacting your family members, or contacting your suite mates. And so those two things is register RSVP and then also sign up to be a mobilizing captain. You'll receive all the information to help kind of organize others. And that could be a good way to kind of get your feet wet in terms of how we're talking about right now in this panel is organizing where you are. And so there's that piece. And I know Carolyn is also helping with the Poor People's Campaign in Michigan. And I know she could also have some more information on some buses that will be departing from the Detroit area to Washington, D.C. So extending that invite, would love for everyone to attend. It's going to be a powerful day to really kind of internationalize all the injustices we're facing and the solutions that need to be done to really bring about change.
We're going to take one comment that was made, and then we'll do some other final remarks from Carolyn, Danielle, and Zach, modeling off what Elliot just did, which is give us some next steps. What are some things we can actually be looking forward to doing? Maybe you can talk a little bit more about the conference. Maybe there's other ways to plug in what's going on at Wayne State and the GBI. So Karen, you want to read off the statement first, or do you want to?
It's just a statement. It just says, I'm taking a statement from one of these platforms. Unions for union's sake is a misnomer. Typically, unions exist to manage the relationships between the structure of society and working people. The function of work within the context of our society is important. Therefore, some unions turn out to be bad unions. One case on point are police unions. They demonstrate this in the fight to protect racist officers and fight against progressive policy to build people power.
All right, great. Well, thank you from that comment out there in the webosphere, whatever it's called. So let's take some final thoughts. Some next steps. One of the things our students have to reflect on, they have to write a paper reminder for this class if you're a student at U of M. And one of the things I ask you to think about is like, what are some concrete ways that you can think about staying involved in the struggles that we've been talking about? And that can be broadly defined. Several came up today. So in our final thoughts, maybe you can just give us some suggestions for students on how to stay plugged in, or all of us how to stay plugged in. Danielle, please.
Just, I guess, what Elliot said about students having power, it's really true. And we feel this especially now, maybe even more than, in the 70s when Rome took over South End, or when the League took over in South End. I mean, because the fact is the universities are being turned into these kind of proto-corporate, or these sort of corporate spaces. And so your tuition money and your potential future donations back to the school are like, especially for a place like University of Michigan, it's like a real driver in terms of it influences all of the people in power at the university. So I think like wherever you are, whether you're a student or you kind of are a resident advisor or a student worker, or you're going to go into a job, I think you can always have this analysis of like, where are the power structures here and how do I play into it and how can I build power, collectively in that space. So as students, I would say, just to plug my, siblings in the union movement at U of M, plug in with Leo, Geo, any of the new kind of organizing efforts like around the libraries. There's a lot of kind of organizing happening. And I think people are saying, campuses across the country are sites of organizing, especially public university campuses are going to be like a big fight in the labor movement. So, that's what I would say. And also fight student debt, that's the other big national thing.
Thank you, Danielle. All right, Zach, tell us maybe more about the conference and other things.
Yeah, so if you're in a union, but not just that, if you're really curious, we have the Labor Notes conference coming up, which hate to fight for space, but it is also the same time as the march. So to be transparent, apologies. But yeah, it's the largest gathering of trade unionists in the country. Again, I also think internationally as well. There are going to be workshops on organizing skills, panels on what people from all across the country and internationally are doing in their unions, and reforming their unions and forming new ones. And it's just amazing. I'm really psyched. There's going to be art and cultural events. It's huge. A next step also is if you're in a workplace, I'd suggest try and form a union if you feel dissatisfied, rather than go someplace else and hate it in 6 months. Form a union. And I didn't emphasize it as much, but very heavily involved in Detroit DSA. If you want to get involved politically on some level, either helping with somebody's electoral campaign, or we have an environmental justice working group, or if you just want to be around a group of people who are forming unions and just have some kind of support network like that, hit us up. I'd love it. Just come talk to me after this.
Thank you, Zach. I'm going to add a few more things to what Danielle said, and then we'll let, if Elliot wanted to add anything else, and then Carolyn, you'll bring us home. At U of M, students should know that the nurses are organizing right now actively, and there's a lot happening around hospital workers and Michigan medicine at U of M. Also, there's a campaign called One University, or One U. If you don't know about that, look it up. It's an effort that's been going on for several years now to try and sort of equalize in many different ways the resources across U of M's 3 campuses. We know that Flint and Dearborn's campuses historically received way fewer resources, students, faculty, and the whole institution. So there's an effort called One University, One U. Look it up. More broadly, organizing, as you kind of pointed to, these sites, U of M is going to be has been and will continue to grow in being a workplace that has a lot more labor organizing going on. So I would encourage you as students to pay attention to that. Some of you may already be involved, whether that's the resident hall staff, student RAs, whether it's staff more broadly. There's a lot happening at U of M. So please always reach out to me after this class if you want to learn more. But Carolyn or Elliot, Elliot, you want to say anything else in addition to what you said already about the June 18th?
No, that's pretty much it. I think, would love for students to attend. Thousands of students across the country are actively engaging, joining the movement, again, amplifying their voices, raising their voices, heading to DC with folks from other parts across the country to really kind of amplify our voices on the struggles that we're all facing, the struggles that we mentioned on the call, right? So if y'all want to connect, be happy to send my email over, or also link up with Craig, and I'll be able to kind of make that happen. So yeah, would love for folks to join us. So yeah.
Thank you, Elliot. Thank you so much. Carolyn, how can we stay connected to what's happening here? How can we support GBI?
Can I see, everyone, if you have a cell phone, can you raise your cell phone? All right, we're about to open these cell phones. And we're gonna go to, this side of the room, with the exception of these two. Have Instagram? Yeah. Some of y'all over here have Instagram? Now, no, I see some head shaking. Yeah. If you don't have Instagram, if you have Facebook over here, you can go on Facebook. Go to General Baker Institute. That's our handle on Instagram. That's our handle on Facebook. That's our handle on TikTok. And that's our handle on YouTube. Yes, we have a TikTok. So I will know if you're not hitting the subscribe, and if you're not, oh, I got one. How do I 7 new? Oh, Ashley, where's Ashley? Ashley just, yeah, I'm calling them out. So I'm gonna call you out. I don't see a notification. The Instagram notifications are coming in fast. And then we have YouTube. we need to get up to 1,000 so we can just go live and I don't have to use some of this stuff. If you want our tech to work better, get us up to 1,000 people on TikTok and Instagram, and then we can go straight live. But that's, look at these coming in, that's great. Follow, subscribe, hit the bell on YouTube. That's how you can stay connected right away, instantly with us, but thank you. And then if you have any questions, feel free to ask anyone there, anyone, yeah.
If I could, I would like to add this in terms of the General Baker Institute is we need some volunteers or some real people. As you can see, this space should be full all day, every day.
Well, we don't have a staff. Yeah, but yes, we want to be.
And I want to recruit a writing crew, which leads into a study crew. And we got to pick up some trash around the garden. It needs to be a garden because we need healthy food. And this is the last point that I want to make. The productive force is split from the natural science of the movement of the universe. In order to correct that, we got to strengthen the synapse between the synapse and the neurotransmitters. It's got to be healthier with more fiber and more nutrition. One of the things that happened with drum is that we worked ourselves. A lot of times we get on the campaign and it would be 2 or 3 days before we figure out we ain't even ate. So what I'm saying is you got to be healthy in this struggle because they have mastered the science of the toxins to put us down.
Thank you. I gotta cut it on there. I gotta cut us on there, but you're good. Yeah, we can keep talking after this, but thank you. Yeah, we need volunteers and everything, but I only got like 7 notifications, so I expect to have more by the end of this.
All right, keep following the General Baker Institute. Let's thank the General Baker Institute. Let's thank our awesome audience. Community classroom, Elliot, thank you, Zach, Danielle. It's been a great series. You know, that was a lot of applause. That's awesome. You know, we're so thrilled to be back in this space, and we're going to keep growing this series, and we want to keep supporting the GBI. So thank you for being here out there in YouTube land. Thank you for being here in the class. U of M students, you're coming back here next week for just our own little huddle to reflect on the whole series, but the public series will continue again next academic year, and obviously the GBI is going to do a whole lot of stuff in between. So thank you for being here. Have a great night, and take care of yourself.